Is Nathan Phillips a Vietnam veteran? Apparently now people are calling out this Native American activist from the MAGA incident for, and it's not necessarily stolen valor. People aren't saying he never served, but that he wasn't old enough to actually serve in Vietnam. And this is where it gets more complicated. So first, let me just say, it's entirely possible he did serve. I'm not saying he didn't. I don't know if he ever said he was a Vietnam War vet. What he said to CNN and other outlets, he was a veteran in Vietnam times. Some people are saying these are weasel words. He's saying this so that if people ever call him out, he'll say, no, I never said I was a vet. But he knows people will make the assumption that Vietnam times is implying that he was in Vietnam. Apparently, he may not have been because he wasn't old enough. So first we have this tweet. I don't believe this is the first tweet on the matter, but it says, breaking. Nathan Phillips, who was harassed by Covington, they put harass in quotes, Covington Catholic MAGA teens, lied about being a Marine combat vet during Vietnam War. Phillips was born in 1955. He claims to have joined the military at 17. That puts him at 1972, the last Marine combat unit left Vietnam in 1971. Now, I don't think this is factually accurate. First of all, I don't believe he ever explicitly said he was a Vietnam War veteran. I think he says Vietnam times, and okay, sure, he didn't specifically say Vietnam, he was in Vietnam, but many news outlets ran that narrative. Thus, it's more likely an issue of fake news jumping off of his, I don't know how you describe that kind of statement, but it is to an extent misleading, but you can't really accuse him of doing it on purpose. You see what I'm saying? But anyway, I also believe that the last Marine actually left in 1972 because I have another story. So, I have this article. It's from Granite Grok. I don't know what it is. It says, dominating the political bandwidth in New Hampshire. Is Nathan Phillips too young to be a Vietnam vet? This is from the other day. People are once again challenging this narrative that maybe he lied. So there's this letter. This person apparently says, the question asked, when the last U.S. ground combat troops left Vietnam? We gave the correct answer, 1972. The last American combat unit was a task force from the 3rd Battalion, 21st Infantry Regiment, and Battery B, 3rd Battalion, 82nd Field Artillery Regiment, which had been stationed in Da Nang. He says, I commanded Battery C, 3rd Battalion, 82nd Field Artillery, and B Battery was our sister battalion. These were the last U.S. ground combat units in Vietnam, and I was there when they left in August of 1972. As a matter of fact, when my unit disbanded in June 1972, we sent B Battery about 15 of our guys who stayed with B Battery until it left in August. Of note, these C Battery guys took along a U.S. flag that had flown over my firebase and put it up over the B Battery firebase where it flew until the task force departed in August 1972. Therefore, the last American flag to fly over a U.S. firebase in Vietnam was mine. Some American troops were still in Vietnam until they left in 1973. So, no combat troops, however. So, now we get to the main thread that I believe triggered this conversation. Time for a full thread on Nathan Phillips. I do not know whether or not he was a Marine. Without a FOIA, this will not be possible. I do know that his claim that he is a Marine combat vet during Vietnam is false, though. Again, he does point out, we don't know if Nathan ever said this, so it's not necessarily on him, but it does seem like he tries to indicate that he is. Phillips made very specific claims. Although tracking each individual source down is difficult, I will try to collect them here. This is from a user that's _noman2000. I also want to point, this individual follows me and then actually makes reference to me, maybe doing a deeper dive into this. This is about as deep a dive I'm going to do in it because I'm not super concerned with the idea of stolen Vietnam valor for the most part. I think it is important enough to warrant this kind of video and address the topic, but I think it may actually be fake news running wild with the story because they like the narrative and not so much Nathan Phillips making these claims, because I don't believe I've ever seen him explicitly say this. And even as this quote here, it says, did Phillips claim to be a Vietnam veteran? Quote, I was in Vietnam times, and when I was in the Marine Corps times, that's what I was expendable. I was in Vietnam seems straightforward. However, he said Vietnam times. Now, this user does point out it seems to be a weasel word that maybe what he's trying to do is insinuate, he wants people to assume he was there without actually, saying he was there, so he has some kind of plausible deniability. I'm not going to imply I know what this person's intent was. In fact, I'll do this. I'll give Nathan Phillips the benefit of the doubt and say what he's trying to imply is that he joined the military during this era, when the Vietnam War was winding down, and so he experienced a lot of what was going on in war and in the Vietnam era. I think it's fair to say, to a certain extent, Vietnam Times, because you want to imply the general treatment of the troops, of the Marines, period. And how would you explain that with, like, in such a way without constantly having to do this full explainer of, like, I joined the Marines at the tail end of the Vietnam War. I wasn't explicitly in Vietnam, but, you know, I was there and experienced a lot of what was done to a lot of these veterans, and I saw what happened. Like, it gets complicated, right? One of the things that I also want to point out, too, is people, you know, when I often talk about how I was the founding member of Vice News, I could very easily say something like, I started Vice News. And sometimes I do say that, but it's complicated. It's much more complicated than that. When it comes to my work, I don't want to just make that statement. I did this, and so I'll say I was the founding member, and then people have accused me, like, what does that mean? And I'm like, it's really complicated. I was at Vice producing news specifically for the news outlet, first employee before anything was up and running, and the work I did convinced them to do it. So I actually don't think it's unfair for him to say Vietnam Times, and I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. But the issue then arises with the fake news, right? Sorry to deviate on I was trying to give an example from my personal perspective. But what ends up happening is the BBC calls him a Vietnam vet. It says, this has been touted around in several news reports. Yes, and many activists have been claiming that too, that a Vietnam veteran who holds ceremonies for Vietnam vets is always being harassed. Well, maybe he didn't really even say that. What did he claim to do? I'm a veteran, says Phillips, a Marine Corps infantryman in the 70s. So he's claiming to specifically be in combat arms during Vietnam. Not necessarily. I don't think so. During that era, right? So again, I think it would be fair to say this is a media problem. The media wants to jump on this. The media wants to make the claim, it was a Vietnam veteran, oh no, because it draws sympathy and will go viral. Gelman amnesia is something I just tweeted about, I talk about regularly, where people who are experts on an issue will see a news story and say, wow, that's fake, that's ridiculously wrong, but then turn to the next story and assume it's correct. This is another interesting phenomenon where the media likes to fluff things up, exaggerate, or use assumptive language, right? So they'll say something to make you assume something may or may not be true. Nathan Phillips may be guilty of this by saying he was an infantryman in Vietnam Times, or maybe he's just trying to simplify it by saying, like, it was during this era, which I believe could be fair, but it's absolutely wrong of these media companies to then just assume Vietnam vet. And that's their fault, not Phillips' fault, not the activists' fault. The media's job is to fact check. And they very easily could have checked his age and say, it is extremely unlikely he was 16 or 17 years old, because they do his age now. He was, in 2006, they said he was 45. In 2019, they say he's 64, which gives him a birth year of presumably 1955. This individual says he'll push it a little further and say maybe 1954, just to be fair. He claims to have joined when he was 17. This would put him at 1972. The problem? The last Marine combat vet unit left Vietnam on June 25th, 1971. However, I believe he does go on to point out that there were some stragglers still left behind. He says, Vietnamese Marine Division, which played a large role in the defensive actions, incidental to North Vietnamese 1972, offensive, blah, blah, blah. Which one? I think I just lost what I was looking at. Anyway, we have this other article that claims it was August of 1972, and this is from Jerry Morlock, Armchair General Senior Historian. So, again, I don't know which is or is not true, but let's keep going on. He says, knowing that it must be after January 20th, okay, he's just doing birth year for right now, let's scroll down a little bit. The other thing he points out of 58,220 dead soldiers, there was only, what does he say? There were 5 men killed in Vietnam that were the age of 16 and 12 were 17, so it was extremely unlikely that at his age he would actually be in Vietnam. But again, I think the whole point of this thread, and the reason I'm talking about it, is that what we can say definitively is that it doesn't seem to be that this man is actually a Vietnam veteran. It seems to be that the media is, look at this, actually look, we got ABC 13, Omaha elder and Vietnam veteran Nathan Phillips said. I don't blame Phillips even if he was trying to mislead people. Let's say he was doing the weasel word, which, actually, let's find that tweet. He says, he points out the weasel words. So, it's hard to just, like, immediately find it just shooting through. So, let's see, he asks if anyone can verify it. He claims to have served in 1972 to 1976 and to have been in Vietnam. So, apparently, that may be the case then. Since Marine combat units were out of the area completely in those time periods, I don't see this claim being true. I don't know if it's in this story, if it actually... Here we go. He also keeps using the weasel word, Vietnam Times. I don't like this weasel wording at all. It seems like he's trying to insinuate that he was in Vietnam, and if he gets called out on it, he'll say, no, I said Vietnam Times, not Vietnam. So here's the definitive statement. Fox 5 San Diego, Vietnam vet, okay? Let's see, we got ABC News 13, Vietnam veteran, and the BBC, Vietnam vet. Even if Nathan Phillips' intent was to deceive you by using a weasel word, doesn't matter. I don't care. That's fine. If you're confused about what he means, ask him for clarification. Don't make assumptions, but you know, people will, and it happens. But if you're a news outlet and you publish as a Vietnam veteran without fact-checking, that's the big problem. This is another example of the huge issue with news organizations that don't even do background checks on the people they're supposedly interviewing. They put this guy on TV and he lied. He claimed they were yelling, build that wall. Never happened. He claimed that this kid blocked his path and was sidestepping to not let him leave. Never happened. The media is now just totally downplaying everything that happened, and I don't trust these activists. I think the kids are just dumb kids. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. I mean literally, kids are stupid, okay? These are just kids who are jumping around, dancing, laughing, clueless about what they're totally oblivious. I'm not saying they did anything wrong. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I'm just saying, kids are goofy and obnoxious. End of story. So, I guess I'll just say this, you know, for whatever reason I did this video, I wanted to point out, this thread's been going viral. There's a few threads with hundreds, some have thousands of retweets. The ultimate point, the media is the one putting out fake news. I'm not going to blame an old guy who uses a phrase. If I want clarification, I'll ask for it. But be mad with the journalists who aren't fact-checking this. That's our big problem right now. And I said it before, we've got a media emergency. The amount of fake news being pumped out is alarming at this point. Everything's collapsing, and it's going to make things a lot worse. So anyway, one more video coming up. And yes, once again, we're going to address fake news coming from this story. The media is some media outlets are apologizing and retracting, and we're going to look at that perspective. So stick around. That video should be up now. Just go to my channel. You can check it out.